noises. I am talking right now. Testing, testing, testing. Yeah, I'm gathering this. All right, talking. I am making noises and speaking. 1, 2, 3, 4.
I am speaking. This is the single channel, channel 1. Trying it again, single channel, channel 1.
You want me to try this one out?
Yeah, these should be good.
What was that?
This one should be good.
Okay.
This is dual channel, channel 2.
I can hear from here, so. I didn't hear an echo, I just heard your voice. So.
And then go ahead and do the same to that one.
All right.
It's going to get pulled out and turned on first.
Already done, yes. All right, testing voice noises. I am speaking. Blue, red, green, yellow, magenta, purple. Talk, talk. Cool. Do I need to turn it back off or are we leaving it on now? Because this is a strike.
Turn it off for now.
Okay.
Ask about the format.
Gotcha. Strikes me as a pain for something you just want to turn off and on.
Okay, I kind of love this. I can't take it home? I can't throw it? This is terrible. I can't have a sword and now I can't keep this and you won't let me throw this thing. Seriously. The sword thing goes back 3 years. Isn't it cute? I want this. It wants to go home with me.
And it's really good because somebody asked a question last time. I could not hear them to save my life.
But you
and
could
then
do
they
that?
threw it in, and then they talked through it. I could hear everything.
That's very good.
I look like a fool going, I have no idea what you're saying.
Yell it out.
Yeah.
I like this. It wants to go home with me.
All right, I'm going to go find my chair.
Dr. Ebay's here, so I'm going to go to that again. I was just punting Dr. Ebay when he showed up.
Oh, well, thank you so very much for doing that. We are still waiting for Suzie Jary, one of our panel. She did not answer her phone. She's lost somewhere. Hopefully she gets here while we are still in discussion. Again, welcome to the Dean's Forum. My name is Alex Ebay, and I'm going to be your moderator today. Thank you, Dr. Mira, for inviting us to Wise County. And thank you all in attendance today. Hopefully, you will get to participate in this beautiful discussion that we have. This discussion is being heard in so many other institutions around the country. So we are beginning that discussion here, especially as it pertains to rural community colleges. And we are going to have a very nice discussion here today. Hopefully you have questions to ask. All right? So again, the topic today will be identifying barriers, preventing marginalized population from attending and successfully completing college. So we are going to be looking at it from academic and non-academic perspectives, barriers. And then today, our panel consists of Dr. Daniel O'Meara, your Dean, West County, Dr. Laura Overstreet, our adjunct professor of sociology. Professor Suzie Jary is not here yet. We have Dr. Bill Alexander, education specialist with the Catholic Charities of Fort Worth. And we have Dr. Norma Jones, our adjunct professor of communication, speech, and editor of the Popular Culture. So welcome all. I will allow our panel 3 minutes each or less to give an opening remark of some sort before we start feeding questions from the audience. You can go in any direction. Dr. Mira, you want to start? Can I start?
Well, I'd love to start.
Please.
Sure. Can everybody hear me okay? Whitney, can you hear me okay? Nice. Okay. Whitney can hear me loud, everything's fine. I'm going to ask our students. I speak a lot to our faculty and to our staff. Of course, this place wouldn't run without them. Let me focus on the students for this particular 3 minutes of introduction. Students from traditionally marginalized and underrepresented populations often face barriers during their higher education experience. I'm going to throw it out to you now, students. What are your perceptions of marginalized populations? The question is to you guys. It's in your court. It's your forum. Let me repeat that question. What are your perceptions of marginalized populations? Yeah, about 2 minutes. Awesome.
There will be a test.
There will be a test.
I think maybe explaining what the marginalized means.
And if that came from a student, I would have loved it, Doc. What is a marginalized population, O'Meara? We can define marginalized populations in several different ways. The way I'm choosing to define today is we can define students at the margins. They are not in the center, they're marginalized, they're on the periphery. As those who, because of their personal and their social identities, their positions in life, their social economic status, have limited access to resources, face direct or structural discrimination, and are less likely to enter and academically succeed in higher education. First-generation students are often also considered to be marginalized. So, Doc, I hope that answers your question as to how I define marginalized populations, folks that are on the outside. Let me throw it back to you guys again. What are your perceptions of marginalized populations, class?
One thing, if I may say, one thing that the panel will not know is that I'll be giving you a cheating sheet up here. So you might be seeing some information that can help you formulate some questions for them. All right? So let them know that. So you can be looking there from time to time as I see you with your feelings.
And then we'll go down the line.
All right, very good.
Go ahead.
We live in Rome, Texas, which it takes us about 22 miles to get here. Somebody that did not have a good car or did not have the money for gas would have a problem in getting to even this college. When you stop and think about UNT or UTA or TWU or any of the other big, even bigger universities, there's no way that with the traffic and the time and everything else that a student would even have a chance of going to college. Even going to Weatherford from where we live is 56 miles. So at that point, I mean, that would be a big long drive for us, and it would take us about an hour and 15 minutes to get there. Some of us, and that's why we were supportive of having a college here, because we wanted our area to be able to have some sort of institution like Tarrant County does. They have their community college, and to us, this was a big plus to support the college to have another part of the Weatherford College in here.
Discussion started.
All right. Very good. Before we feed more questions, let me have Dr. Alexander make a very brief comment. Very good.
How you doing? I'm Bill Alexander. Like Dr. Ebay said, I'm with Catholic Charities. That I won't need that. Can y'all hear me?
We need that for you to stream. For this.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. I'm an education specialist with Catholic Charities Rural Vocation Program, Northwest Campus. I actually am on the Weatherford College's main campus, and I manage a scholarship program there for underserved, marginalized populations of students. So. A young man was walking along the sidewalk next to a construction whenever he wasn't paying attention and he fell into a hole. Immediately understanding his plight, he began to cry out for help. Along about that time, a doctor walked by, heard the young man's cries from the hole, looked down, and asked, "How can he help?" And he said, yes, please, I need help getting out of the hole. So the doctor broke out a pen and a prescription pad, wrote the young man a prescription, folded it up and threw it in the hole, and walked along his way. The young man in the hole picked up his prescription, looked at it, and said, well, I'm not sure what this is for. I don't know how it's going to help me out of this hole. So he crumbled it up, he threw it on the ground. The young man began to cry out for help again. Along about that time, a famous baseball player walked by, heard the young man's crying in the hole, went to the hole, leaned over, and the young man looked at the baseball player and said, please, I need help. Can you get me out of that hole? Get me out of this hole. And the young man the baseball player said, absolutely. So he reached in his pocket, pulled out a baseball and a pen. He put his signature on the baseball, autographed it, pitched it down in the hole, and walked off and went about his way. The young man in the hole looked, hi, how are you doing? Come on in. I believe you're right here. The young man looked at the autographed baseball and said, well, I'm not sure how this is going to get me out of the hole. And he threw it on the ground and he began to cry for help again. Along about that time, his friend walked by and heard the young man's plight, yelling for help. He walked to the edge of the hole, he looked down, and he saw his friend. His friend looked up and said, thank God you're here. Can you please help me out of the hole? Without even thinking or hesitating, his friend said, absolutely, and he jumped down in the hole with him. And the young man looked at his friend and said, what are you doing? Now we're both stuck in the hole. And his friend said, yeah, but I've been here before. I know the way out. I've been here before, and I know the way out. President Lyndon Johnson once said, there are no problems we can solve together. There are no problems we cannot solve together, and very few that we can solve on our own. As you can understand and imagine the young man that's in the hole, he represents how our marginalized and underserved population of students feel. Often there are a lot of people around that have good intentions and opportunities to help, but what they have to give is not what is needed. Nelson Mandela said, when we are determined, we can overcome anything. Let me be clear, if you're a student at Weatherford College, you're already an overcomer. You've already achieved so much. You've beaten the odds, and you're here. Does that mean college is going to be easy? No. But it does mean that because you're already an achiever, that you didn't come here to be average. Mediocrity just will not do. It also means that at Weatherford College you have faculty and staff that are willing to help you. overcome the barriers that you're going to have to navigate the college, and you're going to and watch you be successful. Today we have a panel of experts, great thinkers in their field, representing multiple areas at Weatherford College. More importantly, however, we have a panel of listeners who need to hear from you, the marginalized, underserved populations of students. Because we may think we have the answers, right? Based on our own experiences and based on what research supports. But we need to hear from you. We want to know how we can better serve you, how to help you navigate through higher education. In short, I just have one final question, and that is, how can we help? Because really that's what we're here for. I turned it off. It's you. It's you.
It's all you.
Yeah, we went the wrong way.
Sorry, I was late. Oh, okay. Is it on now?
Yes, it's on. You're good.
Can you all hear me? Yes? Yes. I don't think it's on though.
It's for the
It goes to the camera.
Oh! Suzie Jary, I'm an instructor at the Weatherford College main campus in the Substance Abuse Counseling Certificate Program and the Human Service Provider Program. I just came from there. I teach till 12:20 and had contact with students and responding. So I apologize for being late my first time out here. This is a beautiful building. It's great. And I just want to say to all you students and faculty and staff, you know, to quote our new president, Dr. Todd Farmer, Weatherford College changes lives. And I had a mentor that always said, how do you be successful? You stick with it. Whatever it is, you just stick with it, stick with it, stick with it. You know, it's kind of midterm time, and some of my students are ready to drop, and I'm like, communicate with your instructor, ask, stick with it. Adequate is good enough sometimes. Just get those letters after your name and just stick with it. I'm happy to be here and to talk on this subject. If you can imagine, some of our students in the Substance Abuse Counseling Certificate Program have their own personal journeys and stories. That's what's called them to work in the field. It's the licensed chemical dependency counselor. I hope some of you, I brought brochures and I'll see you at college night, will consider it. And so we have a unique group that could be marginalized, those people that have had criminal issues or legal issues in their background. And people have certain ideas about that. And in fact, I inform my students that even if you've had a felony and you've done your probation or parole and you're off papers, you can register to vote. Many people don't tell you that. It's not in every state, like in Florida, they cannot, but in the state of Texas, if you're off papers, you may register to vote. And I'm happy to say we registered over 148 students this year. It's the midterm elections. That's where you can have a voice. If you do feel that you are of a group that is underrepresented, your voice is another way that you can, by voting, have an impact. Because a lot of our funding for everything from disability, substance abuse, healthcare, education, you name it, it's going to be that state legislature, House of Reps and Senate, and also, you know, in the Congress and Senate. So on this topic, we also will talk a little bit about EQ, which is emotional intelligence, ways we can support ourselves, and to show up. Very much in the counseling profession, we're talking about self-awareness, self-reflection, getting support, talking to supervisors, colleagues, peers, because sometimes we don't realize what we're doing. So the constant self-awareness and self-reflection to make the unconscious conscious. We're not going to be without any kind of different perceptions, beliefs, or notions from our background and families, our culture, our society, but just to be aware, is this interfering with our ability to connect with this client and form a working relationship, a therapeutic alliance? So we do talk a lot about how to be present and to be aware so that you're not unconsciously
came with 10 tips on improvement, so it's not going to happen. But the definition of marginalization is to relegate someone or a group to a level of unimportance. And for me, I'm not as interested in what it is about that person that made them be pushed to the margin. I'm more interested in why we marginalize. And so I think what's most important to make improvements is to look at our system and to look at any of the barriers that we may have that keeps any individual from reaching their capacity. And so it's a lot more about certainly having student voice, because without that, we don't know. We go on automatic. We're sold programs and initiatives, and they will die on the vine without student input, appreciation, and use. And so I've been in Achieving the Dream initiatives for probably about 7 years, and one of the coaches said, culture eats initiative. And I thought, what are you talking about? But now I know that any ideas we have, if we don't have a mindset to fully embrace them, they will look good to the outside and look good on paper, but they won't be implemented. So I'm really interested in the informal, how does it happen? How do things really play out? And figuring out the ways to remedy those kinds of things. I'll give you 2 little bitty stories, maybe 3, I'll hurry. But one little story is this. I taught at TCC for 17 years, and long ago we used to register in long tables, and students would come up in lines, and sociology was right next to the reading. So I was the reading people. And a student walked up who I had failed my class twice, and they're going, hi, and I'm not sure they were happy to see me, but and the reading instructor said, okay, we want you to read this form and complete it. The student couldn't do it. Finally, I realized probably that was a big problem in my class. But that student didn't feel comfortable about saying, I struggle with reading, because it wasn't acceptable. There are great programs, reading apprenticeship program, that helps people feel comfortable about reading, learn to read, and it takes into account the domains of their existence that you see behind me. There's noise levels that get in the way of being successful as a student. Did you change the slide? No, it's still the same slide. I thought without a student being able to say that, and without a faculty member being able to say, hey, I think there's some reading that we need to incorporate here and some assistance, instead of, making an assumption that they're able to do this. No, we're not going to do that. We're going to see what's needed and figure out how to do that. So I think our system is the culprit in marginalization. If we're going to have student voice, I would love to hear from students who aren't the stars. I've had focus groups. I do ethnographic studies. I hear from, and the colleges tend to, I'm not saying about this college, but colleges I've been at, been teaching for 35 years, they want the token stellar student to come and talk about how wonderful we are. I don't learn from that. I'm sorry. I learned from the one that came to the table and couldn't read and went through my class twice. That's the one I want to hear from. I want to say that it's important for us to appreciate the fact that there is no average. There's an idea as instructors, we're going to design for the average student. A story embodied in a little video you watch, The Myth of Average. It's all about how in the 50s or 60s, they were trying to figure out how these fighter pilots were missing their targets. Oh my gosh, these cockpits were built for the average pilot. And once they measured 1,000 pilots on all of these points, they found out none were average. The cockpit was designed for no one. And sometimes we teach our instructional materials are designed for no one. There's a very, very important point in designing instructional materials, particularly online, but even in the classroom, and that is to be universal. To make your course materials accessible. Anybody can access them. When we do that, we start putting, a nice increase in the capacity and the talents that students can bring to our college and to our community. So I would say none of you are average. I'm not average either. I got long legs, short, squatty body. I sit like this, you know. I mean, that's not what we're really talking about, but we're in the way we learn, in the kind of noise that we have to negotiate. One more little story. I sat with a provost at UNT at an educational technology conference a couple years ago. She inspired me so much. She said, you know what my goal is, and you know what our goal is at UNT? To increase learning per hour. What are you talking about? I want a student to learn the most they can in an hour's time. So we've got to navigate the bureaucratic noise of our institution. We have to get rid of all the redundancy of forms and procedures, or the blind eye, or the bad advice given by advisors. Get rid of that. So that, okay, you got that. We want to reduce that. We want to reduce making students learn things they already know. We want to take them into the zone where they're learning new things. So we want to make sure that our curriculum is not redundant. Ah, that's expeditious now, isn't it? We want to reduce the noise that comes from the other life. Stress, childcare, no housing, I'm hungry. People look at me and say, I'm too old to be in school, or whatever it is. Get rid of that, you know. And we want to reduce the technological barriers, the noise, oh, you're in an online class, you ought to know how to do it. Wrong. You know, let's get that. So I thought, that's perfect. What a great equation. More learning per hour. And having a campus where you can get to it is a really important part. Or having online instruction that you can get to and get a quality education with is all about it. So I'm all about the marginalizers. Okay, thank you.
Does this work with the... It works with the video?
You like the cute one?
Yes, if this disappears, don't come looking for me.
That's supposed to go to the audience to pass around.
But I like it.
Right? You go ahead, take this. Let me turn it on for you.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Norma Jones. I pout, apparently, when I don't get to keep toys. And I teach communication, speech here at this campus, at the Wise County campus. And so a lot of folks think, you know, speech is how to talk good, right? And so I kind of consider speech in different ways, in how we use the tools of communication to achieve what we want. And it was kind of interesting for me to be part of this panel because even though I'm considered a minority in the U.S., you know, folks, Asian Americans folks, we range about 5 to 6% in the U.S., we're severely overrepresented in academia, right? There's more of us than pretty much any other group. And at the same time, that's kind of true around the world as well. And around the world, I'm actually not the minority. There are probably more Chinese folks than any other single country. So it's really kind of interesting having, you know, mother who had a master's, dad who has a bachelor's. One of my cousins, you know, 2 of my cousins have PhDs. Pretty much everyone has at least a bachelor's. Why I'm here. And it has a lot to do with the fact that I actually flunked out of college the first time around. So I was that one that was expected to do well, but didn't get the help I needed, right? Math, I'm supposed to know what I'm doing, okay? So this is actually kind of interesting because it's, you know, it's about what happens outside of our perceived stereotypes. What we mean by marginalized, right? We have all these definitions, and then, you know, who is the marginalizer? Is it society? Is it individuals? And at the same time is, you know, this is where I kind of think about this is, why don't we consider instead of these labels that we take, right? You know, we took out a sheet of paper, if you wrote 3 I ams, would any of them be I am human? Or would they be I am female, I am a student, I am a teacher, I'm a mother, I'm a daughter, I'm all these things, right? What about if we went with the basic identity of human? Probably relate a little better that way. So with that in mind, sir?
Well, before you start asking questions, a few things I need to bring to your attention. What I have on the projector right here, we say geographical barriers, which means urban, suburban, or rural. And of course, we are in a rural community. The barriers that students face in rural community is not the same as that in urban or suburban communities. We all know that. Let's take one of those, for example, transportation. Transportation. We know in the urban areas, So if you have that student who is having transportation issue, they don't have a vehicle, how can they get to school? How can they get to WCWC to take class? Maybe if they have their own transportation, the transportation is not reliable. Maybe they need gas money. They need some repair work done on it. So what some community colleges are doing right now in some rural areas is to start an automotive repair workforce program, whereby they can help teach their students how to fix vehicles and even help their students to fix their vehicle to get them back and forth to school. Think about it. That's one barrier that could make a student not attend college. And the other one is internet service. Internet service, we do know that a lot of folks that live in rural area might have difficulty with internet service. Some of our students don't even have it. So opening the college 7 days so that students can come here to complete their work and stay open till late for them to come here to have access to internet to do their work, that could ease off some pain on these students and bring them to campus. Think about that. How about healthcare and childcare? Where we are, it's a prime location. We have a nursing program. Can we have a limited healthcare on campus to take care of little healthcare needs for our students?
So I think it's an incredible, if I may add, because don't we have a beauty school here? And cosmetology, I know I said the wrong word. And don't we have services available for folks? It'd be kind of cool if there were something similar for healthcare. I mean, I probably am more worried about, cutting myself open than I am about my hair, most of the time. But the idea, I mean, that's really cool.
Okay, I'll go to the other one before I let you guys start asking your question. The other one is housing. How about housing? We have students who are aging out of foster care homes. Some of them are homeless. If you are homeless, you are hungry, you can't go to school. That's the last thing you think about, correct? But if we have housing on campus, just like we have in Weatherford, we have a housing right here, WCWC, where students can live, attend classes. There are a lot of prospects. So these are the things I want us to talk about. Let's talk about some of the things, some of the barriers students in Wise County are facing that could prevent them from coming to school. How can we fix those things and bring these students to campus? Your question.
But every one of those things you mentioned costs money, and that's what it all boils down to, is where do you get the money for these programs that are so necessarily needed? I mean, our property tax went up sky high this year. I don't know if anybody else's did. But the simple fact is you can ask for a raise in property taxes, and most people are going to tell you no. So where do you get the money to build housing, to be able to give? I know that the office here has started a food bank, pretty much, where if the students are hungry, they can come between classes or whatever and pick up something for free. It doesn't cost them anything. And that's a good thing to feed our hungry. But, and like our son's college, they had a clinic that you went to on campus. But where do you get the money for all of this? That's the hard part.
That's why we're here to have a conversation. Yeah. We have to have a conversation. We cannot say because of the money, then we don't have that conversation.
Yep.
Once we start a conversation, then there's always a means, correct? Yeah,
correct.
So I would say let's start that conversation.
Okay.
Okay, Eva, as far as whatever you were saying with the healthcare, I think that, within the nursing programs, or even some of us that are going back to school and aren't actually in a nursing program at the school, there's plenty of people that already have various degrees that can be of use to the college, and we can be of use to each other. There's a girl there's an entire program set up at Weatherford for clothing, for people to go to do jobs and whatnot. And as far as whatever your speech instructor here was saying, with beauticians, like
So I was a single parent for 20 years and a college professor, and childcare was important. And I think it is with a lot of students. And I'm just thinking, just because you were just talking about, you know, having more hours at the library, having evening hours, doing those kinds of things. I know those cost money too. But at the same time, I wonder if we couldn't have some maybe a designated courses now and then that were child-friendly. You know, we don't have a family-friendly policy. And that's one of the hardest things ever to, you know, if people would knowingly sign up for that, I just don't think that would necessarily be any more distracting than a cell phone in class, you know? But I mean, you know, some child-friendly classes. I'll teach sociology child-friendly. We'll study them. I'll teach lifespan. It's like a laboratory. It's fun. Or some kind of mechanism, because we don't have a child care program. Do you have a child care program here on this campus? No. We did that at TCC, and my kids grew up in it. And actually, they'd parade through. We'd say, oh, here's the 2-year-olds, you know. It was great, but it was very costly. And so you don't want that. But, you know, I'm just thinking outside the box with that. I think child care is a big deal.
We have a lot of instructors being here today, so they can start this conversation amongst themselves with their dean. So that's why they're here.
Well, to be fair, though,
yes.
Jennifer and I, yeah, we've had Crystal and her children, and they're very well behaved. What is this? I don't know. Oh, that's like the talking stick. But as Terry points out, he can't have children in the lab, in a biology lab where there's danger, because there's liability issues and there's concerns about that. And his students are focusing on something, not keeping their children from, sticking a finger in something else. So again, it is useful. Here, take it away.
Okay, I want to say something, and if I have it. I actually had a student write a proposal about starting a daycare here on campus, especially during the summer, because that was when she had the most trouble continuing her education. It was when the kids were out of school, and there were fewer people on campus and just fewer people for her to rely on in her own life. So I thought it was a good proposal.
I had a question.
Yeah, that's how she worked it.
If there was like a kid-friendly room where they could actually get hands-on before they're actually working in the elementary schools or the daycares or whatnot,
where the kids could be left supervised.
Yeah,
because that's
for
the key.
people that are already trained to do that job, and they can even earn like a little bit of work study.
Sure.
Would that be a thing?
Yeah, so.
Can we consider, go ahead. Sorry, no, please, you go. So can we consider single parents as marginalized students?
Of course.
I think you could consider parents as marginalized.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, it's actually increasing. Hey, once upon a blue moon, I was a counselor at Tarleton State University. And one of the things that we did in the counseling department is we ended up applying for a grant. It was called the CCI, the College Campus Initiative Grant. And we ended up receiving that grant, and it paid for a whole lot of things. But one of the things it helped us do was, at Tarleton, they have child development and they have teaching programs, obviously. And we do too, right? We have an AAT and we have child development. I believe it's an AAS, but either way, a child development. And they use that, part of that grant, yes, that's going to require grants, to actually do what you're talking about, which is to use some of the hours that the students need to, teach, do child development, do things of that nature. And it was, I guess the Child Development Center is actually what it was called. And it was designed for working single, parent students to bring their children, put them in the child development, they go to class, whatever they do, and then the child development students or the teaching students kind of took care of the children while mom or dad was working. And I don't know if we could do that here. Sure, it sounds wonderful and great. I would be all for it. I'm not in charge. I don't make the policies or write the checks, but you could certainly do something like that through our AAT and through our child development, because I have students in my program who are going to schools, great for mineral wells or whatnot, to gain hours. Why do I have to go there when I can do it right here? Get out of class, go log some hours, doing practicum work with our children. I don't know if that's what we did at Tarleton.
I had a question for Dr. Overstreet. You had mentioned in a conversation with somebody in administration at UNT that one of the problems that was impeding them from increasing learning per hour was that there was bad advice from advisors. I was wondering if you could provide some examples of that, and if you've noticed anything like that here at Weatherford College that we could rectify.
Well, I think we're on a good pathway with our Guided Pathways initiative, in that we're trying to make sure that, courses are really helping a student go toward a direction, and that we've done our homework to understand what might be a course to take that's most expeditious in moving them forward. The student word, the word on the street is, sometimes I get a different answer every time I go to an advisor. So I really don't know what to do, because there seems to be inconsistency. The truth is that costs people a lot of money, time, effort, and an enormous amount of disappointment, and a lack of confidence in our system. So I would just say that I'm optimistic with the Guided Pathway initiative. Anything like that that's going to help us solidify and give consistent information. I'm not an advisor. I've seriously thought I would love to be one, because I think they have one of the most important jobs with the college. But, I think that the word has to be clear and circulated. I will tell you one thing that I've thought of, even with this marginalization or with advising or anyone, we have Canvas. It's an LMS that we can set up learning resources so that we don't have to, knock on wood, hope we can all get together on a certain date and time. We can put together resources for advising. We can put together resources for faculty on how to build accessible materials. We can put together resources for learning about marginalization. And so I think getting the word out in an effective way will go a long way. But that's the chronic complaint that students have. I get a different answer every time.
I thought I saw some head shaking of different answers. Is that right? That's our student population. Use the microphone. Bring it up there. And I'd like to hear that. I'm sorry, we would like to hear that.
Yeah, please tell us about your experience.
Yes, as soon as you started mentioning that, it was completely correct. I went to Tarleton State for a year, and I'm going to give credit where credit's due. My mother helped me a lot before college, but as soon as I got into it, I had no idea what was going on, and I go try to get explanation from countless instructors and everything of the sort, and it was just too difficult to understand what they were saying. But also, I'm going to give credit to the faculty here at Wise County. They are very completely helpful, but then again, I'm only one person. So it is very important that we're able to understand completely what is going on and how to better ourselves here at this campus.
Yeah, and you bring up another point too, and that is another complaint I've heard is they speak so fast.
Yes, ma'am.
And there's a form, I don't even know this jargon. I don't know what that means. And then I feel foolish because I don't know.
And then you don't want to talk anymore.
You don't want to talk anymore, so it shuts us down, so you've been marginalized. See, that's what I think marginalizes students sometimes. We know that, isn't it, with the Guided Pathways, the research, and this is all evidence-based, that there's there's like a 40% too many courses taken. That's huge. Surplus of courses that are taken that were not needed.
Yes, ma'am.
So we've got to get our language. What I would do is let you write some forms You guys talk about what you understand and get with advisors and say, okay, we mean the same thing. Use student ease.
Right.
Right?
And like I said, here at Wise County, I don't want to say dumb it down for us, but they get on our level. They are very personal with everything that we do.
The point is to communicate, right?
Exactly,
It's
yes,
not
ma'am.
to get it done and move on and get somebody else because I want to go home.
Right.
The point is to make sure you've got the right advice and you're doing what you need to do to move ahead.
Yes, ma'am.
That's the point.
Yes,
And I
ma'am.
think we lose sight of that sometimes. We get, oh yeah, you got to.
Yes, sir. Thank y'all.
Oh, yes, I mean, I was just going to say, even this LMS term, which means Learning Management System, for us it's Canvas. But I just did an instructor search a week ago. We were interviewing master's level people, and I had the question that was about, have you used LMS platforms? And they were like, I don't know what that means. So yes, there's a lot of abbreviations and learning management system, and I agree with that. And I just think in the short term, what I find with some of my students is they talk to peers and their students, and they get wrong information. Even today, someone said something, and I said, well, who was your source? What was your source? So I would say, I know with our department, it's kind of very unique because we start out as a workforce like certificate program, and the second year we build on the more academic courses, and it's an unusual animal. And so usually I'm telling people too, always check with the program director or the chairman of your department. Go speak to them.
Yes, ma'am.
Do not be afraid to speak to your instructors. Communicate. So a lot of times I'll say, well, why don't you speak to Mr. White, the director of our department? Because there may be, there's some information that he has that maybe the advisors don't. And it's also for us to then communicate with the advisors. So it's an evolving, ongoing process where we, even as faculty and staff, have to continue to communicate. So in the short term, go to the director of your department, whatever you need to do, and just ask about those abbreviations.
How do we as an institution address the burden that we're putting on marginalized students? And the ones I'm thinking of are slightly older, have families, have full-time jobs. I know quite a few of them that are taking 4 classes in addition, and I know on the one hand we like that enrollment and tuition, and they get through the program, but on the other hand, are we setting them up for failure? And if they're on financial aid, my understanding is they're boxed in to, they've got to finish. They can't drop a class without having to pay for it. Is that wrong for us to promote full-time?
Okay, I think that we need to attend to the hidden curriculum, and we need to cultivate the soft skills. I understand enrollments and all of that, but I also understand quality education. And I think that if we devise instruction in a way that gives rise to academic dishonesty, that gives rise to, I just wanted to get it done, and gets us away from learning, we are going to be passing the buck to the workplace and to our citizenry, and we really don't want to do that. I would call for cultivating the soft skills that Derek Bach mentioned, so important, the soft skills being integrity, honesty, cultural awareness, ability to communicate, responsibility. We have a little bit of, I will say at this point, lip service to that with our core learning abilities and all that. Personally, I think those are some of the most important things we can address because they are trying to get us to things that these students will need in the workplace. If you're talking about anybody, but any student who's going to go into the workplace and be able to compete, by and large, they're going to be able to compete not because of their degree, but because of their soft skills. That's what will get them a job. And so I'm just saying that when we try to, let's get you done, you've got a full-time job, 4 kids, and you're going to take 12 hours. I think that's poor advising for a quality education.
How much, and sorry, we should be our own advocates, right? If someone gives me information that's not useful, what about being able to say, I don't understand that. Can you explain that to me in terms that I can understand? And by the way, do not condescend to me, right? Why are we not thinking of this way as well in student empowerment side? To say, okay, you have the right to ask these questions, right? How many of us go to the doctors, not this kind of doctor, but like the ones with the lab coats, and we get all this stuff, I'm like, I have no idea what you just said or what I'm supposed to do next. You know, I've actually sat down with a list, well, what do you mean by this really big word that no one can pronounce outside of you? Okay, and well, you know, that's one of the ways to really consider this. You know, what is termed to be soft skills also could be essential life skills. How do I ask for something? How do I get what I need? And how do I not get run over? So that's.
So from what I'm hearing here, we're talking about now, so we branch off on that of empowering our students. And going back to what many of you have said so far, it appears the topic I'm hearing is how to identify resources, how to connect students to resources to help them be successful. We also talked about, when you talked about students being on campus and understanding what is needed to be done, and then when you look to others who are authority figures and who should be helping you and guiding you, you don't really get that guidance, right? Well, that is one thing. I know many of my students from the high school say the very same thing. Actually, my program serves students out in the high schools, help them prepare for college, and bridge them over to college. And they have said to us literally, they'll go to certain offices and the people will just talk to them, dismiss them, and expect them to understand what they're saying. And they don't ask any more questions because they don't feel empowered. They don't feel that they have a voice. They do not feel that they should ask a question. Basically, who am I to be asking these people a question? Who are the authority figures? So that is something we should really do, is to create an environment here on campus. And when I say here, I don't mean literally here, but any higher ed institution where we help give students a voice and help empower them and help them to be advocates for themselves. That is something that's lacking out there in the schools, and they're coming over feeling that, you know, they just have to go with the flow and they cannot ask questions. So somehow in our daily interaction with them and in our curriculum, you know, bringing those soft skills, as you say, to empower them.
Yeah, can I address you really quickly? Yes. Very quickly. One of the things I was thinking of, we had a really neat campaign on campus at Weatherford about not texting and driving. Signage can give permission, you know, and can send a message to students. You know what I mean? Little signs around. Do you remember that on Weatherford's campus? I noticed, I paid a lot of attention to it. But what if we had signage that gave students permission to ask those questions somehow, gave them voice, or you have a voice, or whatever, because people won't talk about it, you're embarrassed by it, you know, just to shift, do a culture shift, and signage is a way to do this.
Okay. I was just going to say something that was spoken about earlier about how the parents that work full-time jobs and they have to have 4 classes. In a way, some of the scholarships kind of make it harder for them because they are not financially able to do it on their own, so they have to rely on scholarships. But the scholarships, if you look at the fine print, you have to take a minimum of 4 classes to get those scholarships. Yes. So it's one of those, it's a vicious cycle.
Our academic scholarships require full-time enrollment.
So it's a vicious cycle because you have people who are older that want to better themselves and they have such going on in their lives that it makes it harder, but we're not giving them a way to be able to do it slower and able for them to do it financially, because it's like a vicious cycle. You can't pay for it on your own, so you have to get the scholarship, but you can't use the scholarship unless you go full time, and you don't have the time to be able to do that.
So basically it's what it sounds like is a policy barrier, an institutional barrier, right? Because we have barriers everywhere. One of the things, and of course we alluded to it a little bit. Is this thing on? We alluded to it a little bit, but I work with Catholic Charities, and so I manage a scholarship program for students on the Weatherford's main campus. No, I'm sorry, we're not here at Wise County. We're actually only on the main campus. We are planning on expanding the services and actually coming to Wise County, as well as the other branches of Weatherford College. But we're eventually going to be on, Catholic Charity Scholarship Program is eventually going to be on every community college within the 26 counties of the diocese. Right now we're currently on 8 college campuses. But we had to start somewhere. They pulled a name out of a bowl, ended up being the main campus of Weatherford, and so here we are. But one of the things that the Rural Vocation Program does at Catholic Charities is it addresses not only the internal barriers, which are institutional barriers, but it also addresses the external barriers. So it addresses things like, I'll give you 2 great, wonderful examples because I actually got to be intimately involved in this, and I watched it play out from day 1 to present day, and it absolutely amazes me, and it just reinvigorates me and energizes me to continue doing what I'm doing. Of course, we carry a scholarship for 25 people, and we basically pay for tuition and fees and books. We don't pay for all books. We don't pay for parking. We don't pay for housing. We don't pay for meal plans, but books, tuition fees, supplies, things of that nature. So I interviewed several people. I got my 25 students, and we're getting ready for school. 1 week prior to school, one of my students came to me and said, hey, my dad lost his job, and it just so happened that the house that we live in is on site of the job. It was a ranch hand. And so not only did they lose their job, they also lost their house, and they had 2 weeks to leave. And so this particular student had many brothers and sisters, and she showed up to tell me that, because you got to think about it, right? We're dealing with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Everybody knows that, but what does it actually look like in real life? Here's someone who is prepared to be food insecure, no house, no job, no money, but somehow she's going to school full time. So a week prior to school, she said, so I can't do it. I'm going to drop out of school. I apologize. Better luck next time. I'm like, hold on. In case you didn't know, I'm kind of like the gatekeeper of resources, both internal of the institution and external. I can help you out. I'm not like some savior. I'm like, but I can help you out. Let me make a few phone calls. So I contacted Workforce Solutions. So I contacted the Hope Center at Catholic Charities. And through those 2, other things the ball started rolling in place. The family had to live in their van for 2 days. And I know, they're like, oh, that's awful. Yeah, but now they have a home. And now Dad has a job. And, things started going well quickly for them within a span of about 48 hours. You know what? That girl is still in school to this day. And she has all A's and 1 B. Still in school. It's pretty impressive. Then I had another one 1 week into school. And she said, my husband lost his job, and I've got to quit school. Because now I've got to go from part-time work, I've got to go to full-time work. I've got a family, and that's all there is. It's what I have to do. I'm like, hold on. Let's see what we can do. And so we looked at resources. Again, Workforce Solutions and Catholic Charities. And we come up with a plan. We call it EFA plan, Emergency Financial Assistance Plan. And it's like, okay, if Workforce Solution pays for some of your utilities and Catholic Charity, and I'm not saying that's what we're doing every day for every student. I'm just saying for this one particular student. If Workforce Solution pays for some of your utilities, and we pay for some of your utilities for 30 days while your husband gets a job, will that be able to get you back on your feet? And they said, yeah. And we used the Coyote Closet for some things at Weatherford College too. And we pulled together our resources, and we did a lot of things for this one student. This student is still in school, and she has all A's. And, we were able to do that. A lot of times students aren't asking for 2 years, 4 years, 6 years of help. Sometimes really it's only 2 days. Sometimes it's just 30 days. but yet they're in that realm of being marginalized. So what I'm saying is there are internal barriers and there are external barriers, but guess what? There's also resources out there. And I think a lot of times we struggle with understanding where to find them and what they are. If we could just figure out where they are and how to get them, we can help a lot of our students. Now, does that address the fact that you still have to pay full time? Hey, my scholarship only does 9 hours, so when we come on campus, be sure and look it up. Sorry, that was a shameless plug for Catholic Charities.
We talk about these internal, external barriers, but what are some of the things we can control, right? You know, tuition's really, really low here. Doing comparisons. We can't help with housing costs other than going through workforce. We can't help with food costs, but we can do certain things. But what about our textbooks? You know, why are we not, as an institution, writing our own textbooks? I would love to do that, right? I mean, we have the resources. There is a lot of brain power. You know, why are we going through the traditional book publishing system that's, you know, charging students $100 to $200 for something they're just going to update in a year or two for the sake of updating? Right, right. And I'm not, ouch. Right, and so how much of this can we alleviate, right? And some of it, yes, I understand, is probably might need the actual textbook for different reasons, but what about the other areas? That's all I got.
Well, I was just thinking, just last week we had a publisher come on campus at the main Weatherford College campus, and you know, I was telling them I had a book my students can get. The editor wasn't sending them, and they said later they're developing something that for like $200 you can have access to all the books. And I thought, wow, what if we just kind of got together and got with this publisher? People could pay $200 and have all their books or whatever. So I think there's some of those creative ideas. Also, I try to choose the SAMHSA, Substance Abuse and Mental Health Association, that's part of the government. They have free books. It's online, or you can call and get it hard copy. So where I can, I try and use a free book, promote that. So I think there's some ways of creative ways of doing that. Of course, we need to communicate with ourselves. And I think going back to the student empowerment, it's both of us. It's us having resources and accessibility, but also you all. I was speaking to my students this morning about the skill of asking. We don't know we can ask, but ask, ask, ask. If you're on a college campus, you got to ask, 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 and to empower yourself to ask. And if it's not this instructor, go to the director of the department, go to the advisor, go to whatever. And I'm thinking about what you said about the scholarships, because I'd say 90% of my students are returning students with 4 or 5 kids and whatever. And I'm thinking we should all write to the Weatherford College Foundation and let them know that, we returning students would like to have scholarships, but could it be for 6 hours? So maybe we could do that, and there might be a seed change that there might come some scholarships offered by the foundation for returning students to just take 6 hours or 9 hours. I thought, that's one thing you can do to advocate for yourselves.
Let me say quickly that Weatherford College Foundation is still accepting donations. Let me just say that very quickly. Few things just to mention to you. The psychological perspective, we spoke on so many of these issues. Situational, as you brought a person's situation at a given time, such as, working long hours or caring for loved ones or demanding work schedule. So many things could be a factor in terms of you being marginalized as a student. It could be institutional, things that practices or procedures that are in place by an institution that discourages participation in the educational process. Those are the things we also have to be addressed. And then dispositional, as we have here, which is also psychosocial, a person's attitude about their own self. How do you feel about yourself? Do you feel yourself capable of achieving? Or do you feel that you belong? And if so, ask those questions. proactive and asking questions could also be a way to keep you out of the marginalized population. And then, of course, the informational part, you are unaware that persons not aware of educational activities available to them. There are so many opportunities available, but you just have to ask the right questions and the right person to direct you to. One of the things that Dr. Pham, our president, has encouraged drastically is that when you walk around campus, I know you guys do it very well here at WCWC, but what is happening in Weatherford now is that as you walk around, when you see students, say hello to them. The more you say hello to them, the more they stay away from their cell phones. They look up at you and say hello, and crack that smile, and then ask them questions. That's the way you can reach out to the students and make them feel welcome and participate in the process. Just before we conclude, I have Janetta Cruz in the audience. She is our interim dean for workforce. I mentioned something about the automotive workforce program that I feel would be ideal for an institution such as this here in Wise County. Do you have any comment? Would you like to, do you have anything you want to say to that before we conclude?
We do partner with the Decatur High School. We do quite a few partnerships with the high schools because they actually have funding for career and technology programs, and so they actually get quite a bit of equipment funding and facilities. So we partner with Decatur as one of them in this area. They do have an automotive program, and we do a lot of technical dual credit with them. So it would be a pathway that we could start at that high school, and then even other students from other high schools can go to that high school. So that's another student empower thing. To tell any of your high school student connections, get them to ask, because they could go to Decatur and get that program. Just because their smaller high school doesn't offer it, they could. So it's about collaboration and partnerships where money is a challenge, but how can we pool our resources to do that? We do that quite a bit in workforce because it is expensive to have the career training, but how can we partner those resources together and let students from anywhere go to the programs? So that might be something we talk about. Could we use their facilities in the evening to have adult learners come in? So there's lots of options out there.
Very good. It is a little after 3. Yes.
And that's my question. Dr. Alexander, you spoke on taking the time, you know, you said you just picked out of a bowl and y'all got your the Catholic Charities at the main campus. Right now, I myself included, are having the trouble to find classes that, because I'm a very visual person. I like class, I like the interaction from the other students, from the professor. I don't have the means to drive to Weatherford 2 to 3 times a week. And that's what we're struggling with right now, is trying to find classes in our academic, you know.
Are you referring to academic classes?
I am, but I'm also referring to a class that I would enjoy taking. You know, there's very, very many more, not only academic classes, but other classes on the Weatherford campus. And just, do y'all have a broad spectrum of how long it would take to get some of those things here or resources to the Wise campus?
I'll let Dr. O'Meara answer that question because he's been talking about it.
Whitney, thank you for your question. And I'm going to answer, but I need to go on a tangent real quick because we're running out of time. To every student that's in this building and in this hall right now, please reach out to all of us. I see many of you going to Sergeant Higby and his crew. He's a good source of information. My office is down the road. In the absence of taking action, through inaction, bad things will happen, and some of those bad things you're not paid attention to. Through action, a person who shall not be named put together an organization on this campus that feeds children, that feeds our students. So Becky, oh, did I say that out loud? We have the Coyote Closet now through action. Through inaction, that would not be there. Through action, our students and community got together and put together a veteran center for our underserved veteran students. I believe you have a question?
Yes,
Before
sir.
I respond to Whitney?
Yes, sir, and kind of more comment as well, because I'm also an autistic coming here to college, and I feel like I'm one of the minorities. The only autistic I've ever seen around this campus is me, and it feels like any of the teachers I go to, I've only had a few that I've actually mentioned to, Dr. Norma Jones being one of them, that I've been autistic, because it feels like the instant I out myself as autistic, I'll be put into that autistic category, even though I should be like kind of more in between, not a normal student, but not like right at the autistic level, and treated more like just a person who needs help. And I've not seen that at Weatherford College, only by a few teachers, but I'm a bit more afraid to kind of go out and say, hey, I'm autistic, but I don't want to be outed and just put into that lower category.
Thank you for sharing that. Every single person, faculty and staff in this building is here to work with you.
Okay.
Not just with you, but again, to our students who are asking for greater academic offerings to include personal development, I believe is what you're referring to, Whitney, and private and professional development opportunities. As we grow, that is our mantra. My narrative hasn't changed in the last 5 months. We expect it to grow. Dr. Farmer is talking about institutional expansion, and that is happening. It takes a while. We're working on it. I need your help. Every single one of you students, come talk with us and ask us. Tell us what you want. Ask us what you need, and we'll do the best we can to find a way to support you on that. Dr. Ibe?
Thank you very much. Yes.
I'm sorry, I just had a comment.
Go ahead.
Dr. O'Mara, this is the first campus that I will say has let their students speak, and that I've seen complete turnaround, just like with the vet center. I'm not only speaking on for myself, I'm speaking for my husband too, that is a vet. That is, from the bottom of my heart, I can't thank y'all enough for listening to us students and for us seeing results. That's fantastic.
Thank you very much. I totally agree with you. I feel very encouraged, you know, and I'm more energized since Dr. Mira came on board, so that I have a partner to collaborate with, and this is why the Dean's Forum came to you here in Wise County. Becky and every one of you in this room, the faculty members, have worked very closely with every one of you. I have the utmost respect of every one of you. You guys are doing a fantastic job here at Wise County. And the students, you guys are great. I like and enjoyed the questions you asked. What I promise is that every semester we are going to bring one Dean's Forum to the Wise County campus. Every semester we have to do that. All right? We have 3 Dean's Forum each long semester, and so we're going to be having 2 in Weatherford and 1 here, and I promise you that's what's going to happen. And I thank our panel for the hearty discussion. And again, thank you very much, everyone, for attending. And remember, if it is the last Monday of the month, it is the Dean's Forum. Thank you very much. We'll see you guys next time.
I'm going to put this up here.